Welcome to our study tonight. Before I begin, let me tell you that we are planning a trip to Israel. Many of you have been asking. It's November 1st to November 10th. So if you're interested in that, I guess you can email us and we'll be able to get you some information. Let's go right into the news tonight. The U.S. does nothing about another American murdered by Palestinians. Ilan Ganelles of Connecticut was murdered by Palestinian Arab terrorists this week, thus becoming, and watch this, the 147th American citizen to be killed by the Palestinians since 1968. Yet not a single Palestinian Arab terrorist has ever been brought to the United States to stand for any of those crimes. That's about 100. Well, think about that just for a moment. 147 dead Americans and not one prosecution. The problem is not that we can't find the suspects. In fact, the Israeli government has publicly identified some of them as members of the Palestinian security forces. One of the killers, Alam Tamimi, is living openly in Jordan, and until recently was the host of his own radio show. Tamimi was one of the terrorists who carried out the August 2001 Shabaro pizzeria bombing in Jerusalem, in which 15 people were killed, including 15-year-old Malki Roth and Mrs. Shoshana Greenbaum, both American citizens. In addition, 122 people were injured, among them 4 Americans. The problem isn't that we have no extradition process. The U.S. has an extradition treaty with Jordan, signed in 1995. So Tamimi could be handed over right now. So if the whereabouts of the killers are known or can be easily determined, and if there's no logistical obstacle for for them to surrender, what's the problem? Well, the problem is politics. The Biden administration does not want to prosecute Palestinian terrorists because doing so would interfere with the goals of maintaining friendly relations with the PA in order to bring about the creation of a Palestinian state. The result is that justice for Ilan Ganelles and all other American victims of Palestinian terrorism will be sacrificed in order to avoid angering the Palestinians. However, there are concrete steps the Biden administration could take right now if they wanted to, and if they were serious about pursuing justice in these cases. For example, the FBI could join the investigation. They've done it in other places. They could do it there. The Justice Department could offer reward for information leading to the capture of the killers of Ilan Ganelles. The U.S. could apply financial pressure to the PA. The Biden administration is sending $600 million in aid to the Palestinian Arabs this year for killers, terrorists. The Biden administration's failure to take such steps suggests that it's not seriously interested in justice for American citizens of past Palestinian Arab terrorism. And that, my friend, is really a shame. There's the picture that goes along with it. I've told you about this before. Let me tell you again, because it came up this week. The hottest conspiracy theory in 2023, 15-minute cities. Fringe force of the far left are plotting to take away our freedom to be stuck in traffic jams, to crawl along clogged ring roads, and trawl the streets in search of a parking spot. This chilling global movement is called the 15-minute city, the FMC. 15-minute cities, or FMCs, are the hottest conspiracy theory, they're saying, of 2023. In a truly elitist manner, they're saying that. They poke fun at those who dare to question the motive behind these cities. Not all conspiracy theories, though, are wacky, and not all conspiracy theories are wrong, as we've seen in recent history. FMCs may make it easier for citizens to go from point A to point B, but these creations will also make it easier for those in power to spy on us, to harvest our data, and enable Big Brother to become Bigger Brother. FMCs are being actively championed by the World Economic Forum, the WEF, the group behind the Great Reset, and the idea of owning nothing, having absolutely no privacy, and what they say, being very happy. This fact alone should concern everyone. Too many, I'm sure, FMCs sound incredibly cool, but don't be fooled by the name. FMCs are actually smart cities. The word smart is really a synonym for surveillance. These ultra-modern, tech-saturated monstrosities use hundreds of thousands of sensors to vacuum up copious amounts of personal data. FMC policies are currently being rolled out in cities such as Barcelona, Bogota, Melbourne, Paris, and the dystopian wasteland known as Poland. Between now and 2040, cities right across the United States are predicted to spend trillions of dollars on the installation of additional cameras and biometric sensors. Sure, surveillance is bad now, but we haven't seen anything yet. By 2050, more than 2/3 of the world's population will live in closely surveilled urban cities, like glorified rats in cramped cages. The companies running these platforms often work closely with government officials. These companies know absolutely everything about us. These big tech companies will have a big impact on FMCs in the future. FMCs are wolves in sheep clothing. The mainstream outlets poke fun at those who dare to question the "we have your best interest at heart" narratives. We have been burned by too many times before. Our conspiracy theories have been turning out to be not to be conspiracy theories at all. According to our studies, our news, Israel's in the news again. The State Department returns to halting Israel and actually going against Israel. A long-delayed U.S. State Department assessment of Joe Biden's disastrous first year as president, which by law should have been issued on April 30th, 2022, was quietly released on February 27th. One can sympathize with the authors of the Courtesy Report on Terrorism 2021. After all, how could they explain such policy calamities as the restoration of U.S. payments to the Palestinian Authority, the willful blindness of appeasing Iran in the hopes of reviving a failed nuclear deal, and especially the fiasco of the Afghanistan withdrawal? The section titled Israel, West Bank, and Gaza shows that the State Department is back to its fantasies about a trustworthy and righteous Palestinian Authority and overtly hostile to Israel. While the PA is whitewashed in the report, Israel's condemned. Apparently, no one on the State Department thought it odd that the Bureau of Counterterrorism now prioritizes Israel's settlers as terrorists in a land teeming with Palestinian terrorist groups. There are 3 paragraphs describing the so-called Israeli settler attacks against Palestinians, but only a single sentence on the 4,000 plus missiles that Hamas fired at Israel in May of 2021, and no mention of the incredible restraint that Israel showed in Operation Guardian of the Walls. The State Department faults Israel alone for any violence between Israeli and Palestinians. Yet it neglects to mention the PA's Pay to Slay program and the Biden administration's reneging on the Taylor Force Act by continuing to fund the killers of Israelis and Americans. The State Department has a long and sordid history and record of hostility to Israel and advocacy for Arab, especially Palestinian, nationalism. Under former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in the Obama administration, it courted Iran like an unrequited lover. Not too long ago, however, when Nathan Sales ran the Bureau of Counterterrorism and Mike Pompeo was Secretary of State, things were changing for the better. Fantasies of a peaceful Palestinian state living side by side with Israel had subsided, and American Iranian policy had gone from naive appeasement to maximum pressure. Those days are gone, unfortunately, and we are putting ourselves in harm's way as we make Israel really not an ally, but almost an enemy, which is really pathetic when you think about it. When we look at the economy, this one comes out this week. Food crisis grows as number of beef cows drops to lowest level in 60 years. You've been hearing me talk about food shortages and the economy for a long, long time. And this one is pretty shocking, although Americans don't even know it yet. Americans need to be prepared, this says, to eat a lot less beef because the size of the national cattle herd is steadily shrinking. Even CNN is admitting that we are currently in the midst of the worst food crisis in modern history. A lot of people here in the United States refuse to take this crisis seriously. As long as their stomachs are full, they think that everything's just fine. But the truth is that conditions are also starting to get tight even here in the United States. They're already tight around the world. The USDA's biannual cattle report shows that as of January 1st, 2023, there is an 89.3 million head of cattle inventory, which is 3% lower than the total from a year ago and the lowest since 2015. Additionally, there's 27 million beef cows, which are those explicitly bred for slaughter or meat sales at the start of this year, which is down nearly 7% from last year, and the lowest the agency has recorded since 1962. So we have a problem. But even though beef prices have been soaring, most Americans don't realize the gravity of the shortage yet, because we are still eating cattle that were slaughtered some time ago, sometimes 1 to 2 years ago. It takes about 2 years for a new calf to become a stock on your dinner plate. The corporate media is already calling beef a luxury meat, and prices are inevitably going to be a lot higher in the months ahead. So if you love beef, you should stock up now. Meanwhile, food shortages continue to intensify all over the globe. In Yemen, literally millions of children suffer from acute malnutrition. In North Korea, ordinary citizens are reportedly dropping dead on the street every day due to the severe famine that is taking place in that nation. Kim Jong-un is putting his nation's money, into the military, not into his infrastructure or even the feeding of his people. In Somalia, excuse me, the longest and most severe drought in that country's history has produced unprecedented suffering. Sadly, most of us in the Western world don't care about poor people on the other side of the globe. In the UK, the largest supermarkets are limiting sales. Asda has capped sales of lettuce, salad bags, broccoli, cauliflower, raspberry punnets to 3 per customer, along with tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. And Morrison's has set limits on 2 on cucumbers, tomatoes, lettuces, and peppers. And it's being reported that approximately 22% of British households skipped meals or even fasted for a whole day in January because of lack of food. A British NGO has warned that as many as 4 million children are now in food poverty amid the ongoing cost of living crisis. It's really happening, friends, but it can be really easy for those that still have plenty of food to turn a blind eye to the suffering of others. Sadly, this is just the beginning, they're telling us. Global food production will continue to drop precipitously in the years ahead, no matter what our leaders do now. We are running out of topsoil. Fertilizer supplies will become insanely tight in the years ahead. And trillions of extremely small particles of plastic are literally raining down out of the skies on farms all over the planet. Many of our leaders understand what's going to happen, but they don't want to alarm the public. Well, it may be time for us to be alarmed. Let's go on a little bit further and talk about war. A couple items on our agenda there. The clock is ticking. 2-year countdown to war between Israel and Iran. This may be the biblical Gog and Magog war. The shadow war between Israel and Iran has been going on for years, but developments over the last few years may be pushing both nations into a countdown that will inevitably lead to a full-scale war. More specifically, a 2-year window now appears to be opening that will force Israel to act or risk facing an Iranian nuclear program that is both fully operational and protected. Experts say Iran can enrich uranium to weapons-grade standards, now listen to this, within the next 12 days. A conclusion shared by CIA Chief William Burns. However, once they reach the point where they will need another 18 to 24 months to build their first warhead and the means to deliver it, a guidance system. Every Israeli leader in recent history has vowed to never let that happen, with current Prime Minister Netanyahu himself suggesting a possible military confrontation with Iran. And he says it's approaching soon, saying that Israel won't wait until the sword is at our necks. Netanyahu pointed to Israel's precision strikes in Syria in 2007 and Iraq in 1981 before they could turn over their nuclear programs to be on the point of no return, as a warning that action was needed now by other nations to pressure Iran into concessions before it was left with no choice. Another major factor narrowing Israel's window for an air campaign is that Iran is seeking sophisticated new air defense systems from Russia. The prospect of Iran getting the system, called the S-400s, would accelerate a decision on a possible attack. Moscow and Tehran have drawn closer since Moscow's invasion of the Ukraine. The S-400s, which can hit aerial targets, planes from Israel coming in at a range up to 150 miles. Right now, Iran does not have that capability. The more air defenses they have, though, the more difficult it will be to hit them. The longer you wait, the harder that becomes, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said of a strike on Iran at a security conference in Tel Aviv just last week. "We've waited very long," he said. "I can tell you that I will do everything in my power to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons." Russia has offered Iran unprecedented defense cooperation, including in missiles, electronics, and air defense, and may provide Tehran with fighter jets. In December, the U.S. said Russia was deepening military backing for Iran in return for Iranian supplies of drones for Moscow's war in the Ukraine. The next month, the Iranian lawmaker said Tehran expected a delivery of Su-35 fighter jets from Russia by mid-March. The fear by many Israeli planners is that any action by Russia to support Iran could lead to a broader conflict. For Bible prophecy experts, this scenario could lead to what is often called, as I said, the war of Gog and Magog, found in the book of Ezekiel. In chapter 38, the prophet Ezekiel warns of a time in which Russia, Iran, Libya, Turkey, and Muslim countries invade Israel, perhaps in retaliation for Israel's attack upon Iran's nuclear sites, which obviously is coming up. The invasion is triggered by something Ezekiel describes as a hook in the jaw, giving the idea that Russia is being forced into the conflict. An Israeli attack upon Iran's nuclear program would certainly do that. The end result, according to Ezekiel, is that Russia, Iran, and all its allies are wiped out in a way that sounds a lot like a nuclear conflict. Very few passages in the Bible describe in such detail the after effects of a battle, and it certainly sounds like there is a contamination with professional people to bury the dead after a significant amount of time has passed. So we may be closer to the Gog-Magog war than anybody actually envisioned. Another one with war is this one. Wars and rumors of wars. 3 flashpoints that could erupt into World War III. The sound of war drums is getting louder all over our planet. An update on the 3 major conflicts which could lead to World War III is thus. Tensions have reached a boiling point. Imagine if these 3 growing conflicts were to erupt all at once. Massive chaos. Number 1, the United States and Russia. We're playing a terrible game of Russian roulette, and no pun intended. We're playing a game where our very existence is on the line. The conflict in Ukraine has evolved into a full-blown proxy war between the United States and Russia. Russian authorities have made it clear who they believe their real enemy is. The United States officials are not even trying to hide the reality of a situation any longer. Our politicians in Washington keep telling us that we are in it to win it. And on Friday, another gigantic package of military aid was announced. The U.S. is providing more funding for the war in Ukraine than anyone else, more military equipment than anyone else, more ammunition than anyone else, and more military intelligence than anyone else. Matter of fact, we're actually bringing Ukrainian pilots to the United States to train them on how to fly F-16 fighter jets. But despite all of our help, the Russians continue to advance. In fact, it appears that the fall of Bakhmut is imminent. And if Russians start gobbling up chunks of territory, Ukrainian leaders will become increasingly desperate. And desperate leaders can do some really desperate things. Already the Ukrainian president has been asking us to nuke Russia. Second big war. Israel and Iran, as I've told you. We've been hearing that the Iranians have been getting close to being able to build their own nuclear bombs for a long time. And now it's being reported they're potentially only 12 days away. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been warning us for a long time that he'll never allow the Iranians to build a nuclear weapon. And it sounds like he realizes that the moment of truth is now upon us. This war will start in a way that most people do not expect. Small miscalculations in the Middle East have a history of growing into larger conflicts. And once a conflict does start, the U.S. will inevitably get involved. The third one, United States and China. We have reached a stage where what is coming is obvious to everyone. The Biden administration is certainly not helping matters by constantly poking at China. Meanwhile, China has just announced that they will dramatically be ramping up their own military spending. They will boost its military spending by almost 10% this year, rising to a total budget of 1.6 trillion yuan. In American money, it sits at 230 billion, up nearly 16 billion from the budget in 2022. A war between our two nations would be absolutely cataclysmic. Chinese leader Xi Jinping issued an unusually blunt rebuke of U.S. policy on Monday, blaming what he termed a Washington-led campaign to suppress China for recent challenges facing the country. And U.S. Army Secretary Christine Wormuth just warned the United States homeland would be at risk. When such a conflict erupts. Let's hope for peace. But right now, everything is moving towards war. So we could literally find ourselves fighting a war against Russia, a war in the Middle East, and a war against China all at the same time. Needless to say, we're not anywhere near prepared for that. In fact, it's being reported that 77% of all Americans, listen to this, from ages 17 to 24 don't even qualify for military service, as U.S. military struggles to fill the ranks with new recruits. Citing a February 16th congressional hearing, a DoD reports that 77% of Americans in the above age group could not physically qualify to enter the armed forces. A key factor is obesity, which hit nearly 42% in 2020 in America. Meanwhile, a 2022 study cited by the Epoch Times found a link between receiving government food assistance and a greater chance of becoming obese through the consumption of unhealthy foods. A 2015 USDA analysis found that 40% of total SNAP participants for food stamps were obese. The potential for one or all three of these wars to erupt at any time appears to be rapidly approaching. Unfortunate, because we're not prepared in a lot of different ways. When you think about America, if we don't turn and have a national revival, and there's been little sparks firing all over the place like in Asbury, but if we don't have a national revival, then we're going to pay for the things that we've done that are against God. And that's just the truth. Again, excuse me for my coughing. Jesus Revolution movie doubles industry estimates as faith movie takes off. The film Jesus Revolution more than doubled industry estimates, taking in over $15 million at the weekend box office and earning a third place finish overall. The movie earned an A+ cinema score rating from moviegoers and a 99% audience rating from Rotten Tomatoes, meaning the audience absolutely loved it. And so this film is really taking off and hitting America. Further, the Baptist paper reported that Irwin, who is one of the writers of it and actually directors, talked about the Jesus Revolution impressive opening weekend at the Church of Brook Hills, which is just about a couple blocks from my house, in Birmingham, Alabama on Sunday, describing it as his company's Kingdom Stories' boldest undertaking yet. Irwin's idea for the film came from a 1971 Time magazine cover titled The Jesus Revolution. It was about the last great spiritual revival in American history, which saw hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions, come to faith nationwide. In fact, the 1971 cover, along with the 1966 Time cover, asking, "Is God dead?" are both seen in the Jesus Revolution movie to illustrate the arc American culture has made in those few short years. Actor Kinsley Graham stars in Jesus Revolution as California pastor Chuck Smith, who was one of the most prominent leaders during the Jesus movement. What it reminded this article writer most of in our time, the love, sense of community, the things we all had in common. And it was real, and he said, "I miss it." Who knows, Grammer said, maybe this film will bring some of that back. The light in people's eyes then was genuine and sincere, and there was a connection of faith that was extraordinary. In our culture today, that's exactly what we need. Not so good news comes from this article. Enough fentanyl to kill every American. That's how much fentanyl was intercepted by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency in 2022. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid designed to be used as a painkiller. It is highly addictive and is 50 times more powerful than heroin. The DEA has called fentanyl the deadliest drug threat facing the United States ever. Just 2 milligrams of this drug, about enough to cover the tip of a pencil, are enough to kill a person. In 2022, the agency seized over 379 million potential deadly doses of fentanyl, over 10,000 pounds or 4,500 kilograms of the substance. That was enough to kill every single man, woman, and child in the United States. The amount seized in 22 is double the amount that was seized in 2021. Most of the fentanyl coming to the United States and most of the other hard drugs are entering from Mexico. You remember that place that has an open border that Biden won't even go and look at, drawn in by a strong market for them. Once in the country, they feed an ever-growing culture of addiction in the United States. It's no surprise that the rise in drug use is occurring as our societies turn away from our Creator and His Word. The attempt to fill a void in our lives by using drugs reflects the loss of hope in the future. Yet the Bible reveals that real hope for the future comes from the Word of God. Psalm 119, verse 147 tells us that. Human beings need to understand that there's a real God and there's an ultimate purpose for every single one of our lives. Without that understanding, many are turning to drugs that only offer a short-term escape from the emptiness that they feel. I've said it many times that when we push God out, other things come in to fill that void, that hole that's inside every one of us. That's exactly what's happening in America. The disturbing thing that's happening is this. How long will it go on? Burlesque for babies draws outrage, and it should. Proving there is no bottom to depravity. First it was drag queen story hours. Now it's cross-dressing burlesque for babies in the United Kingdom. But a conservative backlash is growing on both sides of the Atlantic. In last week's video surfaced supposedly family-friendly British drag queen burlesque rave events for babies and their parents, showing nearly naked men gyrating and twerking in front of babies held by their mothers and fathers, cross-dressing men taking cash tips from babies' tiny hands, a half-naked man in a sadomasochistic bondage outfit doing a gymnastic-type act in front of the babies, and men and women stripping in front of children, with one showing a dancer with breasts exposed holding up a baby. The videos have shocked the Western world, which are too graphic to show. After a tidal wave of international outrage fueled by the social media and publications, including the Daily Mail, 2 upcoming scheduled drag for baby shows, reportedly by an outfit called Kaba Baba Rave, were canceled, thank God, and the group took down its website and locked its social media pages. Meanwhile, in the United States, Tennessee was added to the list of red states enacting legislation to protect children from perverse gender extremism, thank God. The drag shows are a British derivation of the American Drag Queen Story Hours, usually held in public libraries, which began in San Francisco in 2015 and spread across the United States. But even those events, which stunned millions of Americans who wondered why any parent would want cross-dressing men offering crude caricatures of women to be role models for their children, are tame compared to the UK baby burlesque, launched by 2 British moms who reportedly were once performers themselves. Listen, give Satan an inch and he's going to take a mile. And what's happening here is really pretty pathetic when you think about it, because it's exposure to children. The question is, why do men and women wearing barely any clothing, wearing bondage gear and stripper heels and thongs, need to be performing for children? This perverted, depraved movement of sexualizing everything to do with kids has to stop. The Kaba Baba rave parties' main clientele appears to be bored moms, housewives, looking for some adult-oriented entertainment and are willing to take along their innocent babies to get it. It's gearing up to be unlike anything else on offer for little Manx and their parents. And it's bringing the experience of Big London Night Out to a popular social club in Salford this October. It's described as being a little slice of afternoon delight that provides show-stopping cabaret interspersed with baby sensory moments. There's only so many times you can listen to the wheels on a bus, so we wanted to give parents the experience of Big London Night Out with cabaret, drinks, and dancing. One you can bring your baby to and still be home for bedtime. How perverted. They want to have a night out, but they take their children and they make their children exposed to this. This, my friends, is called child abuse. These children should be taken away from these parents. But you got to give a hurrah to Tennessee. They're protecting their children with a new law. The surfacing of the UK drag queens engaged in sexualization stage acts in front of babies and very young children comes after the Tennessee legislature passed the bill, S83, banning such performances in front of kids throughout the state of Tennessee. Under S83, anyone who either hosts or performs a drag show in the presence of children would be charged with a misdemeanor and subject to a $2,500 fine. They will also be subject to 1 year in prison. Meanwhile, repeat offenses it can be considered a felony, which defendants will be subject to a $3,000 fine and anywhere between 1 to 6 years in prison. That is absolutely great news. Talking about drag queens who interact with very young kids, conservative radio host Andrew Wilco told his listeners Wednesday, "I want to know why these men so desperately want to present to children." Wilco said he said that if, say, a female kindergarten teacher were to wear a skimpy outfit in her classroom and engage in erotic antics in front of children, it would be completely unacceptable and she'd be fired. So why, he asks, is it okay for men dressed in drag to do so? My opinion, it's woke wackiness, liberal licentiousness. It's the Luciferian left. Lastly, let me give you something about natural disasters. Natural disasters in the plan of God. The recent 7.8 magnitude earthquake in Syria and Turkey and subsequent aftershocks have claimed nearly 50,000 lives and wreaked vast devastation, including destroying over 250,000 apartments in Turkey. In New Zealand, the city of Auckland and surrounding areas received an entire month's worth of rainfall in just one day, leading to catastrophic flooding. Then within a week, Cyclone Gabrielle hit the Northern Island, causing widespread devastation and prompting New Zealand's Prime Minister, Chris Hopkins, to declare a national emergency for only the third time in the history of that nation. Last week, South Africa's president also declared a national state of emergency in response to widespread flooding in 7 of the state's 9 provinces. In northeast Kenya, several years of severe drought have ravaged crops, killed livestock, created food shortages for millions of people in the region. As we look around the globe, we see an ever-increasing natural disasters, just as the Bible predicts that would happen. With these disasters comes tremendous human suffering. As the Apostle Paul noted, the whole creation is groaning in agony as it awaits the return of Jesus Christ and the revealing of his saints. It's Romans chapter 8. When Christ finally returns to set up his kingdom on earth, the extreme and destructive natural disasters that we see today will no longer happen. They'll be a thing of the past. As obedient nations experience the blessings that come from obeying their Creator who controls the weather. Leviticus 26:4. As we see extreme weather, floods, droughts, famines, and other catastrophes, we can be assured that there really is hope ahead. And let me put a little postscript to this. As I give you in the news week after week, obviously, it's not good news. We're bringing you news, and I'm bringing you news based on Matthew chapter 24. News of the signs of the times. The signs of the times in Matthew are not necessarily good. They are telling us and warning us that things will get worse and worse. So even though I have to do that week by week, they remind you that Christ is coming back. They remind you that the signs of the times will cease when he comes. But right now, we need to keep our heads up and look for that redemption because Christ is going to return. We're going to go